This tutorial, I will walk you through how to prepare your digital photograph before making them into a digital negative. One thing to remember is that we should always edit our photograph the way we want them to be, just like how you want your photograph to be printed digitally. That include working with new adjustment layers with curve, brightness and contrast, or level pertaining to your interest and your editing style. What I'm going to show you now is to do dodge and burn technique and also sharpen your image before you send it into the digital negative template. What I see in my photograph is that this file specifically is an 8-bit file, and I want to change this into a 16-bit file. If you work with raw images, when you open your raw file, the Camera Raw plugin gonna show up, and you can always change the 8-bit file to 16-bit file from there. But for some reason, you could not, and you go into your editing space, and this is what you see. Go ahead and change it right away by go to Image, Mode, 16-bit, to change this into a 16-bit mode. Now, in order to dot or burn a certain area, which means to make a certain area brighter or a certain area darker, we would add exposure onto that selected area. The term is derived from traditional wet darkroom. In order to do that, we're gonna use the brush tool and also adding a new transparent layers for dot and burn. I'm just gonna go ahead and label my layer dot burn. Okay. I want to change my blending mode into soft light. Leave the opacity at 100. Navigate to my toolbar to activate the brush tool. This switch will have to switch the foreground and background color between black and white. You can also hit the X at an X-ray on the keyboard to toggle between these two colors. If you choose black, that means you darken that area. If you choose white, you lighten that area. In my previous test with cyanotype, I know that this area is a little too bright, so I would like to make that area a little darker by burning it a little bit. So I choose a black color for my background color. My brush should be a soft brush, so I reduce the hardness level of the brush down to maybe 5%. I changing the size of my brush by using the slider or using the shortcut keyboard, which is the bracket key on my keyboard next to the letter P as a Peter. Command Z to make it a little larger or smaller. In this case, my opacity is 100, and as you can see, it's way too dark, and I do not want that. Go to history to go back to the previous step, changing my opacity down to either 50 or 25. So I apply only 25% the strength of my brush, and I just go in brushing it to assure that this area will look a little darker later on. And you can see on the layer area there are some sort of tonality, right? Some grayness happening onto your layer here. That is for my height. I wanna make my area a little darker. What if I want to make a certain area lighter? Then I do the same thing. I make my brush smaller, and I want to make this area lighter. Gonna change my color to white. Opacity the same way maybe, and then go in and kind of line it a little bit so it's not too dark. To move across my image workspace, I hold down spacebar, make it into a hand tool, and I can move along my photo quicker. And if you think 25% is a little too low, 27, you can move up to 50% to make it much lighter. It's a very dark shadow right here, for an example, right? It's very much depending on your eyesight and what you want. And then later on, looking at the final outcome of your alternative process to really determine how and what you want your image gonna be like. Command 0 to go back out. And this is before and after, right? So that is how you use the brush tool and soft light in order to help make a certain area in your photo darker or lighter. Now we're gonna do sharpening. So usually, instead of flatten my image, I would just merge everything underneath by hold down Shift, Option, Command E as an Edward to flatten everything underneath, but still keeping them in case in the future I want to make some change. Relabel them. From here, I'm going to Filter, Other, and High Pass. The deal of high pass is that you want to pull the slider all the way to the left to make sure your image is all kind of gray out, and then slowly move the slider to the right to the point you start seeing some sort of definition. You don't want to go too far and you don't want to do nothing. You want to do something, right? Again, it's really much based on your reference to this point. You can do it at 1%. Like by the time I hit to 0.2 or 3, I already start seeing something. But with high pass, we want to do a little bit more. And at the same time, we can always manipulate it to pull it back down if we think that the sharpening is a little too overtly done. I will go ahead and settle at 1 and hitting OK. Right. Changing my blending mode over to overlay. Soft light is okay too, but for this case, I'm going to use overlay. And in this case, you can kind of see before and after. Definitely much, much more enhanced. If you're not really happy with that, looking at the opacity area, you can always lower it. It's not going to be a big deal. If I lower it at 50%, I toggle between and after, still going to look good. Maybe I would be happier at 25 or even 20. I think 25 would be my final destination choices. Yep. So 25 would be my happy ending point. And from here, when you're ready and you're happy with this image, you should file and save it at your editing file, as a TIFF editing file. And then you can just go ahead and flatten this image and then use the move tool to click and drag into the digital template negative with the curve for that specific process.